Okay, well, welcome everyone to the Health Advances Precision Medicine podcast, where we talk all things precision medicine, companion diagnostics, and beyond. I'm your host, Gary Gustafson, partner at Health Advances, and today we're diving deep into the incredibly hot field of digital and computational pathology. And I'm joined by an incredible leader in the field, Paul Beresford. He's the SVP of Biopharma Partnerships at Path AI. And Paul, I'm just super excited to have you on today, not only because of your current role, but because of everything that's led up to it. And dare I say that a common theme might be the recognition of biopharma's role in the advancement of new biomarkers, new technologies. I'm guessing you'd agree with me that a new biomarker paradigm really takes off once pharma starts to invest, once they have a horse in the race. We saw it with CGP, liquid biopsy. We're seeing with MRD, and I would say at least I think we're finally going to see it with an inflection point once potentially we see a companion diagnostic and pharma's interest, potentially AZ's Trop-2 CDX at the end of this year. But I'll throw it back to you. I mean, that might be a provocative point to say that, diagnostics somewhat rely on biopharma for that, complete uplift of a new technology. But you've kind of seen that throughout your career at different points. So what do you think? Do you agree? How important is biopharma's backing in this?
Absolutely. Well, first off, Gary, thank you for that lovely intro. And it's great to be talking to you with our history as well, working multiple times over the years together, and actually being privy to seeing this field evolve over the years, not just personalized or precision medicine, but also seeing, histochemistry evolve and then now digital pathology. And I kind of joke that's a 30-year overnight success that digital pathology is getting to this point. But hearkening to your statement about biopharma, we've seen biopharma play a big role, and particularly in the world of CDX, knowing that diagnostic adoption is a pretty long journey, right? If you think of a diagnostic company pushing a test to standard of care, you're looking anywhere from 10 to 13 years for that assay from discovery through to standard of care, which is a journey. It's almost as long as what you'd expect, or probably a little longer than what you expect for a typical drug development discovery to commercialization. And with that, we've seen now multiple examples where biopharma has been involved in commercialization to drive adoption of both the test and drug together. And if you think back to the days of HER2, right, this was still a pretty long journey with the relative approaches, right? If you thought of Genentech's initial approach through a centralized lab, right, with Empath, and then eventually going to a distributed model, this took years to evolve and also put around the quality and the training standards that were needed to get a quality test in everybody's hands. And then if you think through NGS, same thing, long adoption curve, but it's getting shorter. Then a good example where pharma really doubled down on adoption was Merck with PDL1, and that then narrowed that time from 13 years probably down to, 4 or 5, to where PDL1 became standard care testing across a number of lines of different therapies. So needless to say, that's a good example. So taking that and seeing that evolve and how we can improve on it, I believe also with digital pathology, that there's an element here of standardization and workflow optimization that can be leveraged to drive that standard of care adoption. And I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg with some of those approaches right now.
Yeah, you're so right in terms of, digital pathology has been on the cusp of an inflection point for the past, 20 years since I've been at Health Advances and more than that. And it's just this time feels different, right? I mean, I don't know. We've been doing a fair amount of work with pharma behind the scenes. Once they've got a horse in the race, like things really accelerate. I'm super excited to see what comes out of, AZ's Trop-2 studies later this year. And all that to say, we've done some work as well in terms of looking at that adoption inflection point. And the other thing that comes out of that is the economic justification, right? And when you talk to labs and you say, all right, why haven't you adopted this yet? I think a lot of labs, especially in the community, have a hard time really putting their head around all of the different pieces that come together to make that economic argument.
Mhm.
And we've looked at some of the tools that are out there. DPA has a nice tool. We're building one that's just a little bit more flexible and accessible, so that maybe your more non-academic lab can kind of think about, all right, what are all the pieces here that are going to help make the economic argument? Because we know that's critical if you're going to bring in a new technology. Um, but as we've tested that tool with different labs, unless you're really high level, high volume, and you've got all cylinders firing, day one, it's a little bit hard to make that return on investment without preferential reimbursement, right? Without that extra reimbursement juice that's going to make the economics really work. And every time we look at that and we talk to payers, that argument comes down to, well, we're not really in the business of, subsidizing small technology improvements, et cetera. But once you have a test that cannot be done another way, like a CDX that's
Yeah.
computational pathology based or other things that you guys are working on, then we can start to open up that broader reimbursement discussion. So that's just another reason why CDX coming, a new test you can't do another way, reimbursement inflows. It just all seems to be coming together that now might be different for a big adoption swing. But, you guys, I'm sure, are thinking a lot about, the reimbursement world and how that may be supercharging adoption. So what are you guys seeing? Are we at an inflection point with that? Are we really just reliant on a CDX, or how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, we have two elements of our business. We have a DDX business that's focused on selling AI Site, which is our image management system. And right now, the focus is on that workflow improvements in labs. And we've made public, right, that we've been selected for Quest. They're adopting our image management system across their whole network. Same with LabCorp. A number of large academic labs like Moffitt have adopted it. And you're right. That is right now the focus is on workflow. And it's digitization, case optimization and prioritization, all the way through aiding in diagnosis to eventually, helping write reports, and that pathologists sort of efficiency and helping the pathologists drive their efficiency up with these tools is just an incredible opportunity for large, volume labs. As you noted, right, as you get into the smaller sort of mom and pop operations, that's less clear at this juncture. And we see the second element in our business really helping that. So my job is to go out and partner with biopharma and ultimately find those new applications like CDX that are going to be important to get that differential reimbursement. And, having that, I would say, standard of getting to a CDX makes a very clear medical argument. This is a high value test, and ultimately the value you bring to those smaller players then with a higher value of reimbursement then can make the case for them to bring on board digital pathology and drive that forward. And so, there's probably two tiers of new products we have coming forward. One are these tools to help the workflow and help the diagnosis. And then two, these higher value sort of CDX tools that ultimately will be used to drive patient identification. And that, as we noted earlier, right, is supported then by biopharma and their goals, right, to get to the right patient at the right time with the right drug are helped by digital pathology on a couple fronts, right? So in the clinical trial setting, we can set up these standardized tools to select the right patients. And then two, once you're in the commercial arena, day one readiness becomes a whole different, value proposition. So if you think how, for example, PDL1 was rolled out globally, it was kind of like a a line by line sort of instruction of different geographies, training pathologists, working through on a pathologist by pathologist basis to get them to a higher standard to be able to read PD-L1s, which is a very complex marker, right? It's not a simple 1 plus, 2 plus, 3 plus, right? It's you're looking at its abundance on different cells, and that takes some training. But think about it this way: if now you're able to deploy that to a network of labs already with this digital pathology tool, and essentially it's a plug and play where you're able to roll that new algorithm out very quickly, which automatically then standardize all pathologists, whether it's a path assist or a complete automated form like a QCS. Then you're then able to, day one, have the pathologist at a very high standard, reproducibly identifying the right patient, and that lag time to getting that test as standard of care becomes narrowed, right? And that's what we're trying to do, take that adoption curve of 13 years down to 5 or maybe even a year, right? And that then you can see the ROI for the pharma really changing if you can get that test adopted in a much quicker manner.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that part up, because I think a lot of people see maybe what's coming with some of these computational pathology tests, algorithm, TROP2 NMR, QCS, et cetera, and think, well, that's probably going to be in a handful of big, reference labs, right? Look at the big 5, 6 getting going on that, and you'd basically be able to make that happen. And there's some truth to that. But I mean, the flip side of that is we know eventually the end goal is decentralization, and we've seen
Absolutely.
it with everything, right? And so how are you guys thinking about that in terms of, I hear you, day one readiness, let's get the big labs ready to rock with, the important new paradigm tests. But also thinking forward about, well, eventually, if this is really going to take off, it's got to be decentralized. And this is arguably, just as big of a transition as NGS, right? I mean, like, there's a lot to it. So
Yeah.
what are you guys thinking about there?
Yeah, no, I think short term we're going to see that centralized labs playing a big role, and I think today we have this what's called the Precision Pathology Network. So it's our AI site capabilities across a range of different labs. So you can plug and play across the high volume labs in the U.S. and internationally. But long term, that's going to be in a much higher installed base in a decentralized manner. But what's been the biggest challenge for NGS doing that? It's just having that ability to decentralize in a robust, reproducible way. The return on investment for companies, and this is where I came out of Agilent, looking how to decentralize NGS was a real challenge, right? And the reimbursement associated with that was a real challenge. But I think we have a much clearer path to decentralize with digital pathology. And ultimately, it's not as though it's that big of a technological sort of leap of faith, right? Pathologists are doing pathology today. This is more a tool to really bring them into this new capability of doing these digital pathology algorithms. And I think that justification is there if we have higher reimbursed tests. So needless to say, I don't think the hurdle will be as high for digital pathology than it was for NGS, because, for example, while I was at Agilent, we really struggled on how we were going to do that. And ultimately, the investment to get there was a pretty high hurdle.
Yeah, I love that. That would be a fun debate in and of itself, right? What is the differential adoption ramp curve to peak for NGS and labs versus digital pathology? Maybe digital pathology is having a slower start over the past 25 years, but
yeah,
maybe it ramps quicker from here.
I totally agree. I think it's not a completely new technology, and I think we're just at the cusp of that clinical utility. So immunohistochemistry and making robust standardized readings of it one, but we have this whole whole world of H&E that's just sitting there untapped right now, right? It's a stain that looks at the morphology, and now based on digital pathology, we can truly harness the information that's in that H&E, whether it's to do a pre-screen for a molecular test, whether it's to truly help identify patients that are going to benefit from the therapy based on the morphology. This is a whole new, I would say, dimension, if you will, that's now accessible through digital pathology. And I think that then makes pathologists even more important to that precision medicine equation, in that they're providing that information along that continuum of therapies coming forward. So, it's an exciting time for digital pathology, and AI has really been, along with the infrastructure build, getting the scanners in, having the bandwidth to be able to manage these types of slides, and then ultimately the AI to create those algorithms now is kind of a perfect storm that I really believe we're going to see digital pathology accelerate in the next few years. And I think all the analysts are agreeing with that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. You're bringing up some good, exciting, and provocative topics, and I want to do a shameless plug. So we've got TriCon coming up, right, in a couple weeks, and you and I are sitting on a panel on the AI demand track. I think we both also have talks, one after another. I'll try not to steal your thunder on digital pathology topics, and there's a lot of ground to cover. And I thought maybe I'd give you a second to talk a little bit, maybe a pre-commercial on what you're going to be talking about. And I might, it's up to you, but I thought perhaps you might spend some time outside of oncology, and that might be an area that maybe the broader field hasn't quite fully appreciated yet in terms of digital pathology's utilization. Everybody believes, right? Okay, we do a lot of IHC in oncology, and we've got a lot of antibody drug conjugates on the way. Digital pathology is going to really take over in oncology, but there's plenty of use cases outside of oncology, perhaps driven by, some of our challenges understanding the disease mechanisms of some of these other complex diseases, and maybe AI algorithms are perfectly suited for that. So, yeah, what are you going to be talking about on stage?
No, thanks, Gary. Like, the one area I'll start on is speaking to elements of partnerships and how they're going to be so critical to driving forward digital pathology. And we touched on this already, right? The biopharma relationships. We also have a very strong partnership with Roche, working with them on the immunohistochemistry assays and creating algorithms to help drive forward the adoption of their immunohistochemistry tests. But then you bring up a great point. How are things moving forward outside of oncology? And, our current business is split into two. So we focus on CDX and translational medicine a lot in oncology, and that's, across the continuum, biomarker discovery into development, into commercialization. But we have also a big book of business working in two key areas. One's MASH, so liver disease, and it's focused in on helping clinical trials that utilize pathology as a primary or second endpoint. And over the years, we've developed now an algorithm that helps standardize what's typically done in MASH trials. Is they take three pathologists and they do a consensus score to look at the morphological changes that happen in MASH. And based on that, it's a pretty, I'd say, difficult process to do well, right? There's inherent bias based on the different pathologists you involve. But now with this AI site MASH, we can now take that read and make it much more robust, reproducible, and quantitative, right? And we've now been able to show multiple times in trial settings where, okay, the endpoint in the pathology readout was almost statistically significant, but then using our algorithm, we've been able to show it was statistically significant. And also, we've been working with the FDA for a number of years through the DDT pathway to get this tool now qualified. And we just got qualification of this drug discovery tool by the FDA this year. So big milestone. It took, I think, close to 5 years. And needless to say, now this tool can officially be embedded into clinical trials as a primary endpoint, and the FDA has backed that. So a real big milestone for the company. Now, outside of that, there's a lot of other exciting areas that are coming forward that are showing the need for true pathological endpoints, including Crohn's, IBD, Crohn's colitis, as well as a celiac disease, another big area that's showing a need for a strong AI approach to reading these biopsies in standardized ways. So we're seeing another large growth of opportunity in that area. And then obviously, we continue to survey the field for other opportunities coming down the path, and we're continuing to leverage. We actually have a CLIA lab that we do end-to-end pathology services, and that then pairs nicely with our AI solution for pharma looking to leverage this in their clinical trial setting. So it's a nice complement to the CDX business that we have going on.
That's amazing. To that last point, do you guys see yourselves somewhat as a CRO, or do you compete with the CROs? Are you a bolt-on? Like if some of your traditional CROs, like a Cellcarta or whoever, right, is like, hey, we should be offering some of these digital pathology options throughout our trials. Is it better to partner with a Path AI? Is it better to license? How does all that work?
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of flavors of CROs, and the larger CROs sometimes have labs, sometimes they don't, and sometimes they have labs that don't have our capabilities. So actually, we partner very tightly with many different CROs that leverage us as a central lab for these types of trials in MASH and I&I. And ultimately, it's been a great partnership where we've worked very closely with them to provide this as a service to their customers, and anything from phase 1 all the way through, I think we have 12 phase 3 trials ongoing. So it's a pretty big business that we have ongoing, and we have a lot of CROs see us as a strong partner in that capacity. So yeah, no, it's a nice mutual beneficial relationship with a number of these CROs.
That's great. That's great. Well, a lot of ground to cover in your talk, I'm sure. It's May 4th, TriCon, out in San Francisco. It's going to be a great meeting. I think it's probably the first time they're devoting so much time to digital pathology, AI, et cetera. So, if anybody's out there and not gotten your tickets yet, come on by. Anything else we've forgotten to talk about? I mean, we covered a heck of a lot of ground, but anything else you want to chat about before we close up?
Yeah, no, just also I posted in my LinkedIn, you get I think a code that you can register and get a discount. So just to plug the event, TriCon's, been essentially a legacy conference that was there in the early days, right? Talking about precision medicine. So I think honestly, it's one of the premier precision medicine events on my calendar. So I typically attend that routinely every year. But yeah, any other items I want to touch on? Just I think with digital pathology in particular, and the partnering aspect of this, anybody who feels as though they need a quick summary, please reach out, and I can direct to my team, right? We have a large business development team, so happy to connect the dots for anybody who's on that early days of exploring how they want to leverage digital pathology as well. Happy, we have some great folks that are also seasoned veterans in the precision medicine. So Eric Walk is another colleague of mine at Path AI that is an incredible speaker. So if anybody wants to leverage his training or expertise for a talk as well, happy to coordinate a meeting with Eric Walk as well. And we have AACR coming up, another great opportunity to connect with people, and then obviously ASCO. So please feel free to reach out for any of those events.
Yeah.
We'll be present at them.
You guys have a booth at AACR and ASCO?
We do. Yeah, we're going to have a booth at AACR and ASCO, and the full business development team will be attending, as well as, DDW is coming up, so another big event for things outside of oncology coming up as well. So we're not just present at those meetings for oncology, but liver disease and immunology and inflammation meetings as well.
Excellent. Well, it's a busy spring into the summer for sure with all those conferences, but you can handle it, Paul.
All right. Well, thanks, Gary. That was a great session. Thanks for having me today.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. So, we'll look to see you at those conferences, and if anybody has any questions, Paul has put it out there that he will happily spend time with you and walk you through the ins and outs of digital pathology. So, thanks again, Paul. This was great, and have a good rest of the week.
Thank you, Gary.